when I think of the WMBA, I think about two different things. I think of advocacy, for the mortgage industry when it comes to legal and legislative things. And the reason why our group in particular is so influential in that in the state of Washington is because we have a lobbyist that works with the WMBA. And I've learned so much over the last, 10 years of really understanding how it is that lawmakers make some of their decisions. And you might think, I think a lot of people think that, hey, they make these decisions in a vacuum. What were they thinking when they came out with this? But the reality is that, and for some of them, they do have to make decisions in a vacuum. These bills come down and there's only, so much time to review them. We all hear about this stuff that happens either at a local or a national level where a 1,500-page bill comes across someone's desk and they're all expected to sign it within 24 hours. But the reality is there's key people who spend a lot more time drafting, those laws, those bills, and so on and so forth. And they do seek out guidance and input from the industries that are impacted. And that's what brings us back to the WMBA. We've had the great fortune as an organization to have a really good relationship with the Washington State, DFI, the Department of Financial Institutions. They often will reach out to us when they're looking at, proposing new rules, new laws, new enforcement, whatever the case may be. And we actually, as a board, have an opportunity to share our feedback or then reach out to our members of the WMBA, to their legal departments, their compliance departments, get feedback and share that directly with the DFI. But also, Jessica, our lobbyist, they do the same thing with her. They will reach out and say, who should we be talking to that could give us some insight as to these laws that we may be proposing, how they're going to impact the consumer in ways that we might not be thinking about. And I bring this up mostly because I just don't think our industry understands. And I know that they don't, because I think if they did, they would pay much more attention and be more involved in organizations like this, because it's not just about going to a happy hour or a dinner or seeing a guest speaker or, whatever kind of event we put on, because we certainly have a networking aspect to the organization, as most do. But there's real work and change that can be implemented when you're part of an organization like this. So I don't know. I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to expand on that. And then I want to talk, after you do that, a little bit about what I've learned. Because, I hear lobbyist and I just hear that sounds horrible. Lobbyists are evil people. And I've spent some time talking to Jessica, and I want to at least give my perspective on what I've learned from her. But maybe you have some thoughts on this.
Well, first of all, our lobbyist, Jessica Fortescue, is amazing. She's probably the most valuable element to the Washington Mortgage Bankers Association, and that's why we can say we are the voice of the mortgage industry here in the Washington state.
Right.
We advocate for home ownership. We connect, we have a community, we network, but ultimately we're all working hard to make the dream of home ownership more accessible.
Right.
And that's becoming more and more of a challenge due to affordability and the lack of housing units and all those things. But that's why we get up and go to work every day. That's why the WMBA exists. That's why Jessica is probably sent 4 or 5 emails on topics between the last 2 days alone that we need to be talking about and considering. As far as her as a lobbyist, Jessica is well respected, not just in Washington state on both sides of the aisle, because she prioritizes both sides of the aisle. She doesn't try to play one side or the other. She's very smart, very pragmatic, and she represents the interests that we, go back and forth on. And then she figures out the right way to say it and the right way to bring it up as far as a perspective on how it will ultimately impact the consumer. Because that's what every lawmaker wants to hear. How is this going to impact the person that's either going to vote for me or not vote for me?
Right.
And I've learned that at the national level too. So at the National Mortgage Bankers Association, Jessica's just as respected. She's considered one of the best lobbyists in the country. And so we work closely with them. And one of the topics that we were just talking about over the holidays is rent control. So, we've got to play that very carefully. There are definitely interests that support it and definitely interests that object to it. And we're trying to figure out the best way to navigate that, I guess, tumultuous topic. And, I think ultimately Jessica doesn't endorse one way or the other. She just tries to bring up the sides of the story that matter in how it will impact the consumer.
Right.
And I think we're on board with that too. We're not trying to be, hitching our wagon to any type of political affiliation or any candidate even. We're trying to remain neutral because ultimately we're all advocating for home ownership. And so that's an interesting line to balance as we navigate some of these topics, especially, with down payment assistance programs. Do you offer one, category of people a product where you don't offer another? Maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's justified. But those are the things that we get to vet. And you and I were even on a topic where we served on a subcommittee and we testified when it came to licensing for branches during COVID. I mean, the way the state law was written, you couldn't take an application unless it was in your licensed branch. And everybody knows, like throughout the country, people work from home. Even before COVID, or they were working from Starbucks, which is a different story, but you're working from home, with the security involved and the digital data, how everything is, run and screened. And again, it's very, very secure. It's more secure to do something from your home sometimes than it is to go pick up documents from somebody and bring them home or bring them to the office.
Right.
So, there are important topics like trigger leads that we're working on right now. I think there was a lot of, what's the right way to say it? A lot of lawmakers really didn't know anything about it because immediately when you think about trigger leads, which is essentially once somebody pulls a credit report, those credit bureaus sell that information to other lenders. They pay money for it, and then those lenders start calling the clients. And I brought up the example when we were in D.C. last year to a lawmaker, and it really surprised him. I had a new loan officer start. He took a new application, his very first one, and within an hour of him submitting that application, that client had 53 phone calls. And that is not a good thing. That is not a good experience for a client. But the lawmaker is saying, well, we have to make sure that it's a competitive environment so that the client can get the best deal or the best rate and fee program. Yeah, that's true. But this isn't a good experience for anybody.
Right.
So we're educating people on, the negative side of trigger leads right now. And that's coming up at a national level this year.